Ladies and gentlemen, imagine this. You're just starting your professional career, and you're going to do it in a foreign country. You don't speak the language, so that's a challenge. Yet, you're very, very excited to start this new journey. So you're walking home, and you face every woman's greatest fear. You're attacked. You're injured. Now what? I'm Frank Zaccari, and this is Energy Healing and Integrative Wellness. My guest today is Carey Hauri, and she is from Adelaide, Australia. So it's Friday morning there where she is, and it's Thursday afternoon where I am. Now, Carey lived this nightmare. Let's get right to her story. Carey, welcome to Energy Healing and Integrative Wellness.
Thank you, Frank. It is an absolute pleasure to be here.
We had a chat a couple of weeks ago, and your story just intrigued me. So before we get into the details of the stories, give the viewers a little bit about overview of your background.
I arrived in Australia when I was 6 years old with my family as an immigrant kid. Didn't speak a lot of English. Spent most of the time growing up and my education in Australia, in different places in Australia. Depending on the book that I was reading at the time, it determined what it was that I wanted to be professionally each week. That changed reasonably regularly. But generally, it was either acting or something to do with writing and journalism. And at the beginning of year 12, which is our final year of school here, it became very clear that I was not going to make it as an actor. And so I had to seriously reconsider my professional options and career choices. And I had remembered in year 11 that having a chat with my English teacher then, she had said, Carey, even if acting doesn't work out for you, you are really great with words. I have seen that in your work. And you could maybe think about becoming a journalist or a writer. And so in year 12, when I had to reconsider my career options, her words came back to me and I thought, okay, maybe that's a path to explore, which I did. I was asked by my year 12 English teacher, who unfortunately was not the same person as the year 11 one, what my plans were after the year 12 exams. And I explained that I would be applying to do journalism, study journalism at a local university, which at that time had a course that was had a very, very good reputation amongst in the journalism industry. And it was very difficult to get accepted into the course with only them taking about 25 first preference applicants every year. When I told him what I wanted to do, he said, well, you won't get in.
Oh, my God.
So I knew then I had a choice between listening to his words and taking them on and making them mine and allowing them to direct my life. Thankfully, and it is a choice that has helped me all through my life, I decided to not take that on board. And decided, you know what, this is what I actually really do want to do, and I'm going to give it a go anyway. And if I get in, great. And if I don't, well, then it is clear to me, then that is not the path. Thankfully, I was accepted. I completed my degree. However, by the end of about the first year, it was clear that I was not going to thrive and flourish in a commercial media world. And so I ended up heading overseas or back overseas, having made several trips as I was growing up and during my education, and decided I would work for an international not-for-profit, and then eventually realised that my journalism background and training would be really useful there. The first 2 years was more a time of training and adaptation culturally as well as other areas and language learning. But that is how I ended up in Budapest in Hungary in about my mid-20s. So we're talking early 90s, just a few years ago.
Yes, you were just a child. That's wonderful. So you decided to go overseas. You're learning the language. Now let's get to the story, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is intriguing. What happened?
It was towards the end of my first year in Hungary. So my language skills were still not great. If you know anything about the Hungarian language, it's not one that you just pick up really easily. I had been to visit a Hungarian friend, and I was catching the bus home, and we lived in a house on top of a hill. And so that meant a very steep walk up some stairs and some little back streets. I was finding it quite difficult at the time to move and to walk because I had issues with my back, which required me to wear an elasticized back brace. And this evening I was wearing the back brace, as I usually did, and was walking up the stairs and walking very slowly. So I was used to people walking behind me, speeding up and then overtaking me, because I had to take it very slowly, one step at a time. This evening was no different. I heard steps behind me. It was early evening, but because it was in the middle of winter, it was already dark. But for me, it was just another normal evening walking home after visiting a friend. However, this time something was a little bit different in that the steps sped up and I was waiting for them to overtake me, but they didn't. And I thought that was a little bit strange and just assumed that maybe the person had taken one of the side streets coming off the path. But then suddenly I felt this hand grab me, or this arm grab me around my neck, and a male voice say something, which at the time I didn't really understand what he was saying. And we tussled, but because I had this back brace on, my mobility was severely restricted. Normally, I was significantly taller than this man. I'm a relatively tall person, and I probably would have had a good chance at fighting him off. However, with this back brace and not being able to sort of move more than a few centimetres each way, there was nothing I could do except scream my head off, which I did. And I think I might have qualified to become an actor at that time. The scream was impressive, even to my ears. But of course, it came from a place of fear and terror. And in that moment, it was very strange experience for me. It was like life had two speeds in my head. One speed was, I guess, the speed that everything was happening at in the physical area, where I was screaming, I was terrified, I was panicked, I was fighting for what I considered to be my life in the best way that I could. I felt this pressure in my back, a kind of a digging of something into my back. I was confused. I didn't feel any pain. So I couldn't quite work out what was going on. I remember thinking, I think I'm being stabbed, but then I couldn't really compute that because I expected to feel pain. I was trying to grab his hand from my neck. By this time I had fallen to my knees. So now he was in effect taller than me. At the same time, another part of my mind was in a very different speed. It was a very slow motion and quiet, logical, rational place where it was watching all of this and observing what was happening, also thinking, okay, well, this is it. This is how it ends. There was no fear in that place, though. It was quite a calm, okay, just this is it. And it was this strange, both I guess they were both me, and both were there at the same time having this experience. Now, I think my screaming was so loud and ongoing that I assume I scared him off, because one minute he was there jiggling and digging into my back and trying to, I think he was trying to grab my handbag. But for some reason, I think the way that I had it crossed over my shoulder, it was making it very difficult for him to grab it. And I think in the end, I was screaming so loudly, he just gave up and he ran down the street. At around the same time, a young couple came running down the street to where I was, and I assume again they had heard my shouts and my screams, and were running to help me. And they took me up the road a little way and into a little cafe bar. It was the only place that was really open. Like I said, it was winter, everything was closed, it was dark, it was cold, and a dreary evening. They were fussing over my hand, because when I looked down, I realised that my hand was covered in blood. And so I realised, okay, a knife was involved. It had cut my finger, and so that was where all of the blood was coming from. And as you know, when you cut a finger, it bleeds quite impressively, even though it might just be a relatively small cut. So they were all fussing over my hand and wrapping a towel around that. Meanwhile, my other hand goes to my back, and I'm sort of holding something together, thinking, hang on a minute, I must have been stabbed, still not feeling any pain in my back. And trying to get them to understand, my hand is not the big deal here. I need to know what's going on in my back. But I was wearing my colleagues' and friends' down jacket, which was a dark purple colour. And so they couldn't see anything there. So I slowly took my jacket off. Again, I didn't have the language to be able to really say much except knife in back, knife in back. And then I just took my jacket off and I turned around, and then I heard the gasps. Everyone kind of went, and later on I saw my clothes, and there was this massive blood patch across my whole back. And then they realised, oh my God, something more serious has happened. Thankfully, they phoned the ambulance, which came. And this was just within a year of the borders opening. So everything there was still very, it hadn't been upgraded to more modern equipment. So it was a very old ambulance. I was sure I was going to bounce out of the place where I was laying. But they took me to the hospital on cobblestone streets, which was an interesting experience, jiggling up and down. But I still felt no pain. It was just so strange. My fingers stung, my hand stung, but in my back, there was still no pain. And then at the hospital, the neurologist examined me. And that's where the next part of the story got very interesting.
Yeah, I'll bet. Just listening to it is terrifying, just to listen to it. Now, I was into the former Soviet bloc shortly after it ended, and we were doing some high-tech stuff. And the medical wasn't, the hospitals were really antiquated. Is that what you saw?
It was very basic. I have to say, though, that the medical staff and the person that examined me, highly skilled. A lot of them did go to the West for training. And so I had no doubt that I was being well taken care of, even though the equipment and the way the hospital was set up was not really yet modernized. And he examined me and he said, it turned out I had been stabbed. That was confirmed. It was an injury of about 3 centimeters long and 1 centimeter deep and required stitches. He said, "You're very lucky. Had the knife gone a centimeter or even a few millimeters in a different direction, it could have hit your lungs, your heart, or your spinal cord." And wearing that back brace, which I had been complaining about for quite a few months about having to wear, actually saved my life, because what he said was that it looked like the original impact was into the back brace, which took a lot of the impact. The jiggling was him trying to find a way through, which he eventually did. But when he did, that initial impact was much diminished. So when the knife did go in, it wasn't full strength and power. Yeah.
Oh.
So when he said, "You're very lucky," immediately I said to him, "Well, it's not luck. I believe God was looking after me." And he said, "Well, he can't have done a very good job of that, because why would he have allowed you to get stabbed in the first place?" So that at the time, I really didn't know what to do with that. It felt a little bit like someone had sort of punched me in the stomach. It wasn't exactly comforting to hear that, but too much was happening at the time that I just didn't really respond to it because I didn't know how to respond. And it was only later that night I had been placed, I can't remember it was in a ward or whether I was on my own. I felt on my own. It certainly didn't matter where I was in how I was feeling. I had a drain tube put into the wound. So out of the opening, there was quite a thick tube, which meant I couldn't really sleep on my back. I slept on my side and I did fall asleep, and I had this dream of being attacked, followed home and being attacked. Woke up thinking it was just a nightmare, turned over on my back to go back to sleep, felt the drain tube in my back and realised that it had actually happened. I went through literally what I would describe as a dark night of the soul. It was just a very intense, I don't know what the time frame was in reality, but the thoughts that were coming up were ones of feeling absolutely abandoned, because this neurologist's words came back to me when I woke up. And I was asking myself and God, why has this happened? This is not something that happens to normal people like me. This happens in movies and books. And I was trying to get my head around the fact that this had happened to me, and what did that mean? And where was God? And had I been abandoned? Had I been forsaken? Had I been left on my own to deal with this? And so it was a very intense time of wrestling with some really dark thoughts and trying to make sense of them. And of course, some delayed panic and shock setting in as well, because I had been quite calm the whole time from when I was admitted to the hospital, and quite coherent. I didn't go into any kind of major shock. So I was lying there in the hospital bed, asking all these questions, feeling the most alone that I had ever felt in my life. and really didn't know where to go with that. I then sensed the most amazing presence in the room of love, of peace, of comfort, to the point where it felt like there was someone physically there with me, almost as if when you have someone sitting on your bed and the mattress sinks, it was that kind of sensation. The presence didn't say anything. All I felt was this sense of incredible love and peace, to the point where I kind of just, I think the thought I had was, it's going to be okay, you're here. And I literally turned over and went to sleep. And slept for the rest of the evening, woke up in the morning. And again, that initial shock, okay, what am I doing here? How did I get here? And then the remembering and the realization of what had happened and trying to get my head around that all over again. At the time, I carried a New Testament in my bag and found scripture very inspiring, and it was a real guide for me at the time. And I was working for a Christian organization, identified at the time as a Christian. Spiritually, I'm in a different place now. But at that time, I took out my New Testament, randomly opened it up, and it fell open to Romans chapter 8, where it talks about how nothing can separate us from the love of God. And it lists a whole list of different aspects of life, death, fear, height, depth, past, future, and how nothing can separate us from the love of God. I noticed that one of the items it included was a sword. And I thought, okay, if a sword can't separate me from the love of God, then a small knife is not able to do that either. And in a way, that was the beginning of the healing, I think. I took that as comfort, and that's what then switched and shifted my perception of the experience. Now, I still had to go through healing. I still had to go through the emotional recovery. I was visited a few hours later by a wonderful friend, also our team leader from Vienna. They were there. I had, in those days, we had fax machines. We didn't have emails. So faxes were sent around the world back to my church in Adelaide. And I knew within days, and was very overwhelmed by realizing how many hundreds and thousands of people around the world were praying for me and sending me thoughts of love, of healing, of protection. And I think that was, again, a very important part of the recovery.
Wow. This energy field was emanating out and bringing back this power to you. Sitting on the person on the bed, or you had a near-death experience. That's what it is. I
didn't realize it at the time, of course. And at that time, I didn't think in terms of energy. I didn't have any real understanding. Generally, in Christian circles, that's not something that we would, maybe it's different now. I've been out of the church for many years now, but back then, that's not an understanding I had, but that doesn't matter how we understand it. The truth is still that love is a very powerful, if not the most powerful force of energy. It is considered to be life force energy in its purest form. And that's what was there with me and reminded me of who I really was, and was part of that healing process.
what I've seen and heard in a number of places, Carey, the people I interview, is they said that there's an energy source, and when your energy, your personal energy is negative, that doesn't leave room for the positivity and the love and the trust. And maybe that event with the on your bed was, hey, it's okay. You can let go of the negative, and then the positive can come in, and the positive energy source. And then, because you were there by yourself, you had no family, there were no friends. You were there by yourself, and that's got to scare the hell out of you.
That night, until that experience, definitely felt very isolated and alone in that room. Of course, I was loved, I was supported. That wasn't real for me at the time.
Mm-hmm.
For me, what it started was understanding that we have a choice in every moment to live from a place of fear or love. And that experience, it was a process, and I knew that night, or that morning in particular, that I had a choice to make where I was going to live my life from.
Mm-hmm.
And whether I was going to live it from a place of wanting revenge, wanting justice, wanting becoming bitter, and not being able to forgive someone for something that they had done to me. And I knew that was one path. I knew that I would probably be justified in taking that path by many people. However, I had had difficult things happen in my life before, but I had never allowed myself to see myself or be defined as a victim. Mm-hmm. And again, in this situation, it took time to go through this process, but I did get to that place where I made a very clear decision. I was going to deal with this from a place of forgiveness, of love, and that took a while, of letting go, of understanding that I may never know why this has happened. Also, now in reflection, it wasn't something that happened to me. It's something that happened for me. Mm. It's not an experience I would want to have again or wish on anyone. However, what I learned is that love is always more powerful than fear. And it helped me to start that healing process to the point where I fully healed from that experience and went on to thrive. It saved me from ever having any kind of diagnosis of PTSD. Yes, I was nervous for a while after that. I didn't feel comfortable walking around at night by myself. The first few months, if anyone slapped me on the back, I would scream. However, today, I'm happy to walk around at night. I'm wise about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to walk around at night by myself in an area of a city or place where I make myself vulnerable. At the same time, if I need to walk to my car at night, it doesn't faze me at all. Mm-hmm. So it taught me the power of fear and the power of love over fear, and that every moment we have the choice whether we are guided and come from a place of love or fear.
I've heard it said, you're not grateful for what actually occurred, but you're grateful for what you were able to learn and grow from. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Wow, what a story! What a story! Now, did you stay working with your nonprofit, or did your career path take you in different directions?
I stayed working with a not-for-profit. I actually stayed working in that city for about another year. Again, for some reason in my life, I process events that happen that are sometimes very challenging, very difficult. At the same time, I've always had a very strong sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt at that time, my time in Hungary, in Budapest, wasn't done. I did take a break. At the same time, my visa had expired, and so I needed to leave the country anyway. And so I went to Vienna for, I think it was a couple of weeks, at least 1 week, where again, I was very well looked after. I had some Australian friends there. They made sure I was taken care of and looked after that during that time. I had that change of scenery and geographical location. And then I went back in to Budapest. Initially, the first few months were a little bit rocky, and I had to deal with the fears. However, slowly over time, those fears settled, and I was able to finish my time there and complete the work that I felt I needed to do. Also, during that time, I met a photographer, and she challenged me in a conversation, several conversations, to use the journalism background that I had within the not-for-profit organisation. And so that's why I then ended up leaving Hungary and working in some other areas and countries and places. And that's when I transitioned into working as a journalist, however, in a very different context to, I guess, what my year 12 persona would have imagined. But it was an amazing experience.
This is an incredible story of strength and courage and love. And in fact, we even, in the promotional piece, we've even promoted it as that love overcoming, facing fear with love and trust. Facing fear with love. It's incredible. This kind of a story traumatizes people for a lifetime. And they live in a state of fear, and they live in a state of doubt and uncertainty. I'm so impressed with what you've done. Now, we're just about out of time here, Carey. What last things do you want to leave the view? What last thoughts do you want to leave with the viewers around the world here?
I would like to say, and this is the reason for telling the story, is to let people know that difficult situations, challenging situations, do not have to traumatize us for the rest of our lives. They don't have to hold us prisoner. Healing happens. It's a process, and it can change how we live out those experiences in our lives, and that they can be transmuted, they can be transformed. However, it does mean that we need to make some really difficult decisions and not allow what happens define us if it's not how we want to be in the world. And like I said, I didn't ever want to be defined by the difficult things that happen. I wanted to be defined by other qualities. And so I made the decision many, many times to not allow the difficult experiences in life define me as a victim or as someone who is traumatized or this or that. I wanted to live a full, rich and meaningful life. I wanted to become the best I could be. And so for me, that means every day, even today, it is still a choice between love and fear. And they say that's what a miracle is. And I think a miracle of healing is a change of perception from fear to love. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm still learning every day. However, whenever I feel anger or bitterness or judgment or criticism, either of myself or others, I know underlying all of that is fear. And then I can make that choice and go, you know what? That's not who I want to be. That's not who I actually really am. Let's go back to being who we really are, which is love.
That's incredible. What a story. And ladies and gentlemen, this is something that we can all relate to. We all don't get stabbed. We all go through those moments of doubt and fear and depression. And as Carey has done, is I'm not going to allow it to define me. I'm not going to let the negative energy come into my life and let it be the dominant force. Just amazing. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, we're just about out of time. I want to thank Carey one more time for what an amazing story here. Just amazing. And thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, no matter what obstacles life throws at you, and you just heard a bunch of them were thrown at Carey in her life, I want you to do three things. I want you to look up, get up, never, ever give up. Better times and better people will come into your life. You'll meet someone like Carey. If you want more information about her, contact me and I will make sure it gets to her. You can see this on this conversation on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel, Frank Zaccari. And if you go to the YouTube channel, please subscribe. Now, let me leave you with this as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Carey showed us where many, many of those rocks are. Join me again next week and we look into another life-altering event. Carey, thank you again.
It's been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you, Frank.